Dobro вечер, Mr. H here with you. We're going to talk about Nixon's foreign policy here for you. By the way, if you're following along in the book, this is the back end of chapter 27. Going to go into 28 just a little bit. Don't worry, I'll keep you posted. All right, let's talk about Nixon's foreign policy. You already know it. Vietnam plus a thing called détente. Détente is the easing of tensions. He's looking for a new relationship with Russia and China, and that's also going to help get us out of Vietnam. Because you remember, they need support from the Russians and Chinese to complete the revolution of Vietnam, and so we're going to start hacking away at that Russian and Chinese support. Spoiler alert, we finally get peace with honor in Vietnam and leave. You know from the last lecture, eventually South Vietnam's going to collapse anyway. So Nixon goes to China in 1972. This really shocks everybody because we have no diplomatic relations with communist China. We don't like communist China, but we're actually going to go and talk to them. It might as well, do something like this because it helps gets us out of Vietnam, and it maybe chips away at that Soviet-Chinese alliance a little bit, which is, not working out too well either. They got their own issues. So here we go. We're jumping in on this. As you guessed, hey, Kissinger's idea. And, things get really strange sometimes. Politics makes people do weird things. And here's Nixon, probably got a course on how to use chopsticks. Not sure what he's eating here, but this is what you do for diplomacy. Eat this strange Chinese food you know nothing about, and hopefully you don't get sick. Yes, international policy get really weird. And it starts to work because we're going to find our way out of Vietnam. We start getting friendly with the Chinese, and now the Soviet Union gets a little nervous about this. And suddenly the Soviet Union's inviting Richard Nixon to come to Moscow. Yes, politics could get really weird. Leonid Brezhnev of the Soviet Union is having a great time and laughing with Richard Nixon, the ardent anti-communist. Yes, politics, very strange. Here's Leonid Brezhnev. What's the first thing you notice about him? Everyone yells the same thing. Eyebrows. There he is, the eyebrow man. Leonid Brezhnev's the guy who replaced Khrushchev after Khrushchev embarrassed the whole country over the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Leonid Brezhnev is about as exciting as watching paint dry. He's not the kind of guy who beats on desks. He's not Mr. Confrontation. He's really good with paperwork, and he's really good at appointing people. He's that kind of guy. And weirdly enough, he gets along great with Richard Nixon. So, Soviet Union's in some capable hands, if somewhat boring, and there doesn't appear to be any huge crisis between the United States and Soviet Union out on the horizon. And then we got the Yom Kippur War. Egypt and Syria, backed by the Soviet Union, attack Israel, who's backed by the United States. The U.S. resupplies Israel when they start running low on supplies. The Soviet Union kind of threatens to intervene on the Arab side, and absolutely nothing happens. Yep, the U.S. even went to DEFCON 3, Defense Condition 3, and the whole crisis fizzles out. And why? Why is this not a Cuban Missile Crisis rerun? Because it's Nixon and Brezhnev. They're doing all of this stuff to keep their allies happy. There is no way the United States is going to fight the Soviet Union over this. The Soviet Union had threatened to fly troops to the Arab side, and if they wanted to, they would have. Not one Soviet soldier shows up in the Middle East. The U.S. resupplies Israel because we promised them to do that. And the war just sort of ends. But the Arab world is very upset with us. And they have something we really need in 1973. If they stop sending us oil. And here come the gas lines. The Arabs are extremely upset, and there's very little gas to be found, and it's really going to hurt our economy. In 2008, we had the same problem with oil, but that was more self-inflicted. This time, there's simply no oil to be found anywhere. They are refusing to give us any oil. My father told me about this too. He got stuck on one of these gas lines, and he said, in this country, you have gas lines because there's gasoline at the end. In my country, we didn't have any gasoline. Yeah, well, other people didn't quite see it that way, and we get very upset. We don't have gas lines in this country except, when we have hurricanes and stuff like this. So this kind of stuff doesn't really happen. Even during the hurricane, you knew, it'd be like a week or two. This thing Could go a very long time, really damaged our economy in the 70s. Rough time economically, a little bit before my time, but I've heard the stories. Now, politically, things aren't working out so great. Now, Nixon is the president. Here's his vice president, Spiro Agnew. Hey, his family's from Messina, Greece. He's from Baltimore, back when the Colts used to play there. And he had to kind of resign his position because of tax evasion. Yeah, Greek pride music. Cue that up. Well, no one really noticed because of Yom Kippur and the gas lines, but still kind of embarrassing when your vice president has to resign because of tax evasion. So they bring in Gerald Ford. Now, people might not have noticed the whole thing with Spiro Agnew, but they did notice Watergate. What was Watergate all about? In 1972, the Democratic National Committee had its headquarters in the Watergate Hotel. Apparently, some people, Republican operatives, not even connected to Nixon, broke in to try and find out their strategy. Turns out Nixon didn't really need any help because he won like 48 states. But the point is, this happened. He found out about it and he tried to cover it up. You can't do that. It makes you an accessory, man. And this upset people on both sides of the political aisle. And here's what I keep stressing over and over and over. Your country comes ahead of your party. Sam Erwin, a Republican from North Carolina, was preparing to impeach and try Richard Nixon, a Republican president, because he had committed a felony. The law is the law, right? We see our own impeachment thing, and it's just a complete circus. In 1974, everyone agreed Nixon had broken the law, and we're going to get rid of him. He's smiling because he's not in jail. Nixon decides to resign, so that means Gerald Ford comes into office. Now, this is what we usually call the crisis of democracy in the 70s. This is why this chapter is called the unraveling, because it looks like our government's unraveling. Our economy's in chaos because of the oil shortage. Just came out of Vietnam, which nobody was happy about going into in the first place. And now our political system apparently isn't working. Right now, write down the name Nixon on a piece of paper. Underneath, write down Agnew. All right? Now, cross out Agnew and write in Ford. All right, because Agnew had to resign because of tax evasion, right? Now Nixon is resigning to avoid what is basically felony B&E. So draw a line through Nixon, and now you got Ford, and now they're going to put in Nelson Rockefeller as the vice president. Ford and Rockefeller are now both in the White House, and neither one had even run for the election. Nobody had voted for these two guys. So that's why this chapter is quite often called the unraveling. It looks like everything in the 70s is unraveling. And the 70s is kind of a horror story. A little bit before my time. I remember the very back end of it, but too young to really understand what's going on. So that's why that chapter has that name, the unraveling. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So we've covered Vietnam, we've talked about Nixon's foreign policy, and we talked about what happened on the front end of the 70s. We're going to talk about the back end of the 70s in just a bit. You guys have a great day. I'll talk to you soon enough.